Wow, there's a lot of you people with a lot of stuff. No, I have nothing of extra in my house. I have 2 barns, a basement, and a house with an extra barn. And you know, it's like you have a closet, it will fill, right? You have a barn, it will fill. All your neighbors hear that you have barns, and your friends hear that you have barns, and then yeah, suddenly your barns are all full too. So I just want to say hi, and thanks for coming. This is an amazing turnout, and I was talking to Mary earlier and said, clearly, this is a topic that resonates, because we all have just too much stuff these days, right? And so yeah, Jill, that's better. And it's hard to know where to start. You know, it's like overwhelming. You open one drawer, and I mean a closet, everything falls out, and then you're like, forget it. And it's like, push the door back shut. So we're very, very excited to have Mary Holmes here today. Come on up, Mary. I have to put my glasses on to read this. So she's the owner of Integrated Booth Management. It's her baby. And she has over 30 years experience in managerial and analytical positions while, you know, working with people in various areas with planning and organizing. So we're happy to have Mary here. She brought her John Wagner, who works with Mary. He's in the back. So between the two of them, they're going to have this great presentation, and then they'll take questions. I hope everyone had a chance to get the cookies before Rudy, who was here at like 11 a.m. to make sure he ate. So did you share cookies? Are there enough left for everyone? He's terrible. He'll eat all the cookies every time. You got to keep your eye on Rudy. So anyway, thanks for coming. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Mary's not used to having the microphone like this, so don't feel free to yell from the back if it kind of falls down and she's talking and the mic is over here.
That's what I do.
Remind her to put the microphone back up here. Okay?
That's exactly what I do. Thank you, Stacey. You're welcome. And I am really bad with a mic, and I apologize in advance. So please do shout when I drift off. So as she said, I'm Mary Holmes. I own Integrated Booth Management, and we do anything to do with the seniors and their family, usually adult children's, to help, whether in transition, whether that's moving, just downsizing, getting a house ready to be sold, cleaned out and staged for a real estate sale. So it's really anything to do with transition, whatever you think is helpful, emotionally, physically for you is what we do. So anyway, we'll get going. And Stacey took a lot of what I would say in the beginning, that a lot of people have a lot of stuff. And, that's all right. She's just perfect lead-in for, it's first slide here. It says that it's human nature. We all have a lot of stuff. Even me, who does this for a living, there's certain things that my son and my husband won't let me get rid of. So I feel the pain of it myself sometimes. It's very much human nature, and it's for so many different reasons, and we'll talk about a little bit, and some of them will resonate with you more than others. But just know, obviously, you're not alone. So, and then getting rid of it, or what I say, letting go, or dispersing with it, is very, very difficult. There's a lot of reasons why that's true. You look at things and you say you might need that in the future. You just don't know what the future holds. So you don't want to have to run out and buy whatever that is again, whether it's kitchen items or extra clothing or whatever. So that's one reason why people have a hard time saying goodbye. The second one, I'm seeing this on the job we're on right now, is the money spent. This woman hasn't thrown away anything in 40 years, given away or donated or sold anything in 40 years. Her husband passed away 25 years ago, and she still has all his clothes. So when you put that all together, she sees dollar signs, and who wouldn't, right? I mean, it's pretty overwhelming to think about how much money you've spent over your lifetime, and now someone's saying you need to do away with this right now. So, in order to move or downsize or anyway. And then there's always, it's the items that remind you of your children, your family, the sentimental items. Those are sometimes the hardest. Or if you've had a business and it reminds you of that, it's anything that reminds you of times in your life that feel like they're moving behind you. It can be very emotional, very difficult. So we definitely get all this, and we'll try to give you some advice today. It's, and I'm not saying, even though I'm going to sit here and spew all this great wisdom, that it's going to be any easier. It's a difficult process, for sure. So, we in our society, I would say we all think we've acquired all this stuff, and there's some level of happiness that goes along with all our items, whether they're hobbies or our clothing or our kitchenware, whatever we enjoy doing if we like to cook, and it brings us some level of happiness. And that's true, but as we'll go on, oops, wrong way. We'll talk about how actually it's somewhat freeing and can make you much happier if you have less items than just the items you're truly utilizing now and loving right now, and you can actually have a sense of freedom and happiness. So the first one, it takes time. And it's, decluttering and making all these decisions one after the other. It definitely takes time, and usually you'll start doing it and then think, well, I'd rather be doing something else, whatever that may be, because it's not always that much fun. And additionally, it's just very, very difficult to continue to make decisions one right after the other. You get drained. I've seen it in all my clients. A lot of them, we like to work long days and we're willing to work long days, but some of them after 2, 3, 4 hours, you just see them like they're getting sadder and tireder. So we try to say the earlier you start, a little at a time, if that's what's right for you, is the best way to go about it. You don't know where to begin. I'll talk more about that, but where do I start? I look around and I say, whew, and just go back to whatever, watching television, whatever that might be. But we definitely have good advice on that. And one of the things for sure is take a closet. Just don't think about the whole thing. Think about one thing that you could maybe accomplish this afternoon. It could be a closet, it could be a part of the basement, a small area in the basement. I'm not saying the whole basement, or a small area in the attic or garage. Typically, we recommend those areas first because that's where you put the things. When you're not really using them in your active living space, you stick things in closets and basements, and as Stacy alluded to, the barns that we all have, So, so they're not things that you're going to miss tomorrow, and it's a good place to probably start somewhere. I call it the extremities of the house. Can you see? Am I totally just blocking your view of the slides? Okay. And then the third one, physically challenging. I mean, that is true, and we see that with so many of our clients when they have things high in a closet that they shove there, or the attic stairs are just, not code, stairs. It's physically challenging to do this work. So that's another thing that makes it very difficult, and that is when, we love it. Of course, I'm not here to sell my company in any way. This is an educational forum, but we love, even as a company, when the children are stepping in and helping, because that's the way it should be. They should be helping their parents. And for those physical things like cleaning out an attic and moving things around, that's sometimes what's necessary. I mean, it's just it can be a very physically challenging. I say we're moving from the house. I mean, many of us in Maine do have trucks, but it's also, that can be challenging as well, is finding a way to actually sort it and then remove it from the house. So again, not feeling bad about calling on your children and friends and neighbors or a professional business, because sometimes that's just necessary to help get it done. So the last line, we all tend to put it off as long as possible until you're like, okay, it's really time to move, now what am I going to do? Or you start to work with a realtor and they're like, you got to do something before we put this house on the market that will sell better. I mean, and that's a big issue. If your house has a lot of items in it, it makes it smaller, it makes it harder to visualize people, with their own possessions in there. So if it's, they would like you to get down to either empty or minimalist before you put it on the market, depending on your situation. So some of the benefits of decluttering. I like to talk about health and safety, and we are in these homes sometimes, and when you have knickknacks and items just piled everywhere, I mean, who likes to dust anyway? And then when it's like that, it's impossible to dust it. To remove all those items, I think very few people do that. So, eventually the dust can cause health issues, it can cause dust mites, and then mold tends to build up. So those are serious, can be health issues if there's too many items in the home. And then the risk of tripping, falling, straining, if you're always reaching over items, if there's, and I don't know what your homes look like. We've been in all different kinds. Some people call me and think their house is a disaster, and I just laugh because it is already minimalist, and then there's people who don't think it's bad, and I'm walking over stacks of things. So, I'm not, but a lot of times I feel like there are safety hazards, especially as we age. it would be good to have all your items that you actually use within reach and not a lot else would be a much safer living environment. And this gets a little philosophical, and that's not necessarily my personality, but there are studies that show decluttered house, makes your mind less cluttered, and by simplifying, there's a level of freedom and happiness that goes along with that, and only having what we truly love around us versus 40 years of things that we just don't use. There's many, many studies these days that there's less stress in your life with less stuff. Are you all laughing or agreeing? I don't know. I see some smirks out there. I do feel that way. Sometimes even in a house, totally in my own house, but I'm in a house that I'm working in, and if I've cleaned out a room and it's all ready for sale, I have to keep going back and look at it and say, wow. It is kind of a good feeling. So take that for how you feel about it. And this is kind of a benefit I try, and some people are more into being philanthropic with their items than others, but you can feel like I loved this item a long time and now it's someone else's turn, and by donating it, it can make it a little bit easier to let go if you truly feel like you have 7 coats and you only need 2, that the other 5 are going to help someone that truly needs a winter coat. So that's one way to look at it. And there's so many organizations. Of course, there's the national ones that all come to mind, the Goodwills and the Salvation Armies. But there's many local organizations that you can give to as well. So I always recommend that it might make it easier if you're not a Goodwill or a Salvation Army person. Try to find something that you're a little bit passionate about, that you'd be helping something that you really feel good about. And again, that might make it a little bit easier. The last one, the potential tax deduction, that used to say tax deduction, but as some of you may know, the rules have changed this year and the standard deduction is so high, you'd be hard pressed to even be able to itemize your charitable deductions. But I would still always recommend getting a receipt and keeping track of it, because you don't know. I mean, if you have a lot of medical expenses that you end up deducting on your tax return, you may get high enough, but I have to put potential because I'm not promising you a tax deduction. Accumulation can be expensive in more than one ways. I've worked with so many clients, and I won't ask you to raise your hands, but have storage units. And they say, I'm just going to do this for 6 months while I figure out my next move. And 10 years later, they still have the storage unit. So as you're all thinking about downsizing, some of you may be thinking that because there's so many decisions to be made, so I get why you would do it. You'd say, okay, I can't make decisions on this stuff, I'll get a storage unit because it's not going to fit in my new, smaller home. And then out of sight, out of mind, because hopefully you go to whatever your new living situation is, whether it's a retirement community or whatever, the smaller home, and you're having a good time. And you're in the next stage of your life, and you tend to forget about what's in the storage unit. So if you think about a little analysis, if you get one that's even climate controlled, it's probably over $3,000 a year. So within 3 years, you spend almost $10,000. So, that's just something to keep in mind that people don't think about. And I'm sure in your head, most people think, I will get to this. A lot of them don't in our experiences. I've worked with people at 4 storage units before. So, that's how it can get expensive as you start to downsize. And then there's the mover's cost. The more you move, obviously, if you are having a professional mover and not having a family member help you move, it gets more costly. And if you're moving out of state, they do it by pound. So as John will attest to right now, we're working with a client that has, what's the number, John, on the Newsweeks?
Oh, Time Magazine?
Time
Magazine.
Hundreds?
Right now, we
Thousands?
have thousands.
And she wants to move them all to South Carolina.
Oh my God.
So, and we don't know exactly what the connection is, and that's something else we can talk about, that we all have our thing. I have my thing, John has his thing. We all have our thing of what we can't get rid of books, we can't get rid of clothes, we can't get rid of tools. I mean, everybody has their thing, and this is not a judgment, because believe me, I might have a clothes thing. So, I'm not judging anybody, but she, for whatever reason, is attached to these magazines, and magazines are very heavy. And when you're moving out of state, it is by weight. So we're trying to talk her out of at least some of her magazines in a very respectful manner of maybe picking some of your favorite covers. I think that John has assessed that she spent a lot of monies on these and really, really wanted to read them and never got around to them, and she can't bear to throw them away. So my suggestion is going to be pick the ones with the covers that actually still seem a little relevant since they're 40 years old, and maybe recycle the rest. So that's how moving can become more costly for sure. And even if you're moving in state, it is by hour if you're moving in Maine from the state of Maine to the state of Maine. But if you have a lot of items, obviously it's more hours. So no matter how you look at it, it gets more costly. We talked a little bit already about if you're downsizing to move. I mean, some people legitimately, there's something, I don't know if people read about it in the last, I'd say, year, Swedish death cleaning, which sounds, has anybody heard of that? Yeah. So, it's the philosophy that if you start even in your 50s and 60s and just keep throwing stuff away, or not throwing, I shouldn't even say that, dispersing of it, whether it's giving it to family, selling, or recycling, or whatever the appropriate action is, and you do a little every year. What I've read about it is the goal is that you don't leave your children burdened, that they are not, burdened with your house, when you're gone, so to speak. But what I see is that it might make it easier, I've been doing this a while, and what I see is that it's harder for the people that have never thrown anything away, because there is so much that it is so overwhelming, and there is also that factor where, wow, I spent money on all of this. So if you had gotten rid of a little each year, it wouldn't seem so devastating. So starting early, whatever that means to you, is probably a good idea. If even in 5 years, you can start a little bit of the Swedish death cleaning and just starting to go through it a little bit at a time. So again, we talked about a lot of this already because I tend to kind of go off script, but moving only will reduce the cost of the moving and the storage. And then once you get to your new place, and I see this over and over because we do both ends of it. We get people ready to move, but we also settle people in, which is actually one of my favorite things to do, which means by the end of the day the movers are, by the time they leave, your kitchen items are put away, your beds are made, your pictures are hung if you want that, all your packing materials up. So what I find though is when people bring too much, it's, they don't want to make the decisions because they're stressful, but when we get there, it's very stressful. I've had to put luggage on a balcony before because there was just absolutely not an inch of space left. So, it's one way or another, at some point it has to happen. So whether that's in the downsizing stage or later on, but I do find that moving day itself, it should be like the start of something really great and happy. It can be very stressful when you can't even put one more cup in the cabinet. So that's another reason, another benefit of trying to do the downsizing before you move. And then the last one, I have given away a lot of things in my time, and I can't say I've never regretted it. There was one time where I was like, darn, I wish I still had that bike trainer. That was the only time I can remember in my whole life, and I do give a lot away, and donate a lot, and sell a lot. So I think primarily, and the clients I have worked with have confessed that after it's gone, they don't really miss it. So I don't know how you all feel about that, but I think that, you hadn't really used it probably if it's in your attic, basement, or closets in 20 years, and then you probably won't miss it that much. So then this is probably why you're really all here, right? How do I get started? I say right up front, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We work with people in so many different ways because people have different personalities and what's going to work for them. Some people do work, a few hours on the weekend, every weekend, and they try to do it that way. Other people allot huge blocks of time so that they're not wasting every weekend, of their life doing it. So it depends how you feel like it's going to work. And then there is the whole, is your family, it doesn't always go smoothly. I'm not making this sound easy, like pick a couple weekends and get it done, because what I found is a lot of people's children live in other states. A lot of them left all their items behind, and a lot of parents feel like they can't make those decisions for their children. So, they might be coming for Christmas, so you might have to work around things like that. But, you try to, as you maybe work backwards from when you think that this needs to be done for whatever reason. I mean, even if you were just downsizing for not moving, but just downsizing, you still might want to put a drop dead and kind of work backwards from there, and then work in those items like, when is the family going to be able to help me? When is my family going to be in town? And, always, again, I'm not here to sell my services, but there are plenty of professionals that can help in different ways to get you started. And what we find is, it is a little bit of the overwhelm syndrome at first, just looking around and really not knowing what to do. And sometimes I get in there and work a day, and by the time I come back, they've done most of my job for me. It's just a sense of, I don't even know where to begin. And then once we we're very organized and process-oriented, and once we put that in place, things tend to move along a lot quicker. Definitely getting started is the hardest part, as we talked about. There's always something better to do, I'm sure, than starting this process. But there really are good feelings with progress. I see it even we do work with some hoarders, which is very difficult, but I even see it with them, that after we make some good progress and they're like, wow, look at that room, I haven't seen that floor in so long. So there are good feelings that no matter, even if your situation isn't like that, there are good feelings that come with this, just by getting started and making a little bit of progress. And sometimes that might make you get on a little bit of a roll and say, I'm going to do that again tomorrow. So, setting small goals, we talked about this a little, starting with a closet, and see how it makes you feel and see how it goes, and getting your process lined up might be a good way to get started. I say be organized about organizing, and I think this is the first handout. There's 2 packets, I should have said that. One is just my bio and an article I wrote, but on top, the one on top is the one we're referring to now. This is regarding the first handout. These are some supplies you might want. I think what happens is you start, you don't have the right boxes, the right bags, the right markers, the right tape, and then you might have to go to Home Depot, and while you're there, you might buy some plants, and then you're out in the garden. So, so by being prepared and organized about organizing, I would say is a way that will help you actually make progress. So I put together a little list of supplies. You certainly don't need them all. And if you have a lot of recycled boxes, you can use those, or Tupperware. But you do need some kind of vessels, whether to lined up, because you are going to be making decisions. And you can use dots as well, like those colored, small, round, like 3/4 inch dots. But as you go through, you want to touch things as few times as possible. So you might have a bag that says donations. And just so you know, most donation sites, they like the soft things like clothes and towels and in bags, and hard things, anything glass breakable, in boxes. So, they don't like you to intermingle them. So, boxes are bin, tape if you need it for the boxes to tape them up. Magic markers for sure to mark, because you'd be surprised, like you think you have it all down, but if you have 3 black bags and you don't get back to it a week, you'd be scratching your head, was that donations or is that trash or recycling? So we try to always, have a system. And with me, I try to use black for trash and white for recycling. But it's whatever works for you. And the dots are for bigger items. So you could have yellow is, I want to ask my kids about it. You could have categories. So I'm not telling you it's whatever works for you, whatever categories you think. You can put dots on paintings or furniture or things that are too big to move, or you don't want to move them at this point. You could use dots to designate, I'm going to donate that when it's time. I'm going to try to sell that. So you can use different colored dots on the bigger items, and then bags and boxes to separate out. And we'll talk more about, the categories are up there. I mean, when we work with people, we always say, what do you want to keep? What do you think is going to go into your new home? And what sentimental items do you want to keep? And that's where you need to start. And then from there, you can move on to, what does my family or my friends want? What do I want to see if they'd like to have? And we'll talk a little bit more about how that sometimes goes in a minute, but that's the second category. And then after that, if you have items that you no longer need, but you think they may have a value, that would be the next category, because of course this process of moving isn't cheap, so if you can offset a little of that, that's great. And we'll talk more about how to sell and what the market's like today a little in a few minutes. And then, people do end up still having a lot of recycling and things that need to be brought to the dump in their house. At our company, we try not to throw too much in the landfill. We certainly try to donate what we can and recycle what we can, but there will inevitably, there's things that you can't recycle, you can't sell. Mattresses are a good example. I think Salvation Army will take them once in a while, but they have to be really clean, and, there's always a concern, they don't know where they really came from. So, there's gonna be some amount of trash, unfortunately, but, try to, I would say, donate what you can and recycle what you can before the trash. And have the supplies ready, that's where this list comes in, and clearly mark, because you will, I know it sounds stupid, but I forget all the time, like, what was that pile again? So by marking everything, just taking the time, it's a little extra time, but just taking the time to do that is beneficial. So then how do you do it? We talked a little bit about, it's my favorite strategy, it doesn't mean it's gonna work for you, is start room by room, and that the room may be the attic, but that's my strategy, because I feel like once you accomplish one room, you feel like you've really made a difference, not like kind of, I'll do a little in this room, a little in this room, and then a little in this room. Well, it's not gonna look like you made any progress, and you might not get that good feeling I've been talking about when you do it that way. So, it's up to you what's gonna work for you. Sometimes we do try, especially if we think we might end up selling items, to do it a little bit by category. If a client would like to consign clothes, for example, then we try to see what they have everywhere, whether that's in storage or in different bedrooms. So sometimes we do it by item type. If they seem to have a good book collection where there might be something of value, we try to look through all their books so we can make one decision and bring it one place. So, it depends on what strategy works for you, but primarily I would say take a small area and start there. I think that probably will work best for most. But the idea is to stay focused and save time and not have it be so laborious that the next day you just don't want to do it at all. And then we already talked about what I call the extremities of the home, the areas that you put the things that you haven't really used in a long time, and that way the letting go might be a little easier and get you going. One of the hardest things is memories and sentimental items. So we do have a couple strategies. This refers to, your children's, what's left behind, artwork, some people even baby clothes, gifts from loved ones, items that you've inherited. There's something about those items that they're definitely the hardest. Even a gift that you got from a friend that you looked at and like, oh, thank you very much. You don't really like it, but somehow it's still in your house 20 years later. It's very hard to say goodbye to those items, and I completely get it. But, so some strategies are, and I would say the Time magazines, in the example I gave earlier, might fall into that category of sentimental for whatever reason for this particular client. Is to take a couple representative items, maybe not everything, but take your grandchild's best artwork or something that you just remember so much, and like, I remember the day that I got that. Pick a couple representative items of that. The other thing you can do of, all the artwork is, I don't know how many people use cell phones and have smartphones with cameras, or even a regular camera, and take pictures of the items. And then you'll have them, they won't be taking up space, and when you feel like looking at them, you'll have them still in a way you can remember them. And then again, back to the donating or gifting to friends. If there's something that you love so much and you actually, like if you had a hobby like knitting and you're unable to do it anymore, but oh, I remember this young woman, she's a knitter, and you're able to give that sentimental part of you to someone that they're going to enjoy it. That's sometimes very, very helpful. Or if you donate to a charity that you're passionate about. So those are some ways to deal with the sentimental. And I'll definitely take questions after too, so we can talk about that a little more. Somebody already, I think, asked me about this when they walked in the room, but the rising above the paper. I think, we all thought we needed to save everything forever. Not true. So your second handout, I believe. Yeah, I downloaded this from Consumer Report. I just put it on one page. You're in there. It's this packet that starts with sorting supplies. So the second piece of paper says how long to keep tax records and other documents. So yeah. So it is something we all get buried in paper, and sometimes that one's a tough one because we don't want to do anything wrong. We don't know what to do, so you don't do anything. So we don't have to keep as much as we think, and especially in the current day where everything's online anyway. So going through this, list and looking at the tax returns and investment statements and bank statements, et cetera. We've been in houses that they have every electric bill for the last 20 years. That's definitely something you don't even need to keep the current one if you don't want to. And then the question is, what do you do with it? So depending, back a long time ago, 25 years ago, Social Security numbers weren't everything, including credit card bills. They aren't anymore, and they black out most of the number. So there is a level of, it's a big project to really go through, but typically if you start, you'll get the knack of what could be thrown away versus what needs to be shredded. We're always very cautious with the identity theft piece of it. And I will say, everybody has those little shredders, and that's another deterrent from doing this because that's just not that much fun. But you could, if you wanted to, Staples, and many of you may know this, it's 99 cents a pound, which may sound expensive, but I've brought tons of things, and sometimes I get out of there for $20. So 20 pounds of tax return. So it's sometimes easier. And they'll also, and this is an aside from this, but when you're getting rid of that computer with the hard drive, they'll take the hard, if you don't want to smash it yourself and get rid of it, Staples will take those hard drives and make sure that they destroy them. And so again, because you might have personal information on them. You can upload them. Some of this is, you might need your children or grandchildren. I need my son, I'll be the first to admit it. But you can sometimes take photos of items and upload them, or a lot of things are online now, so you wouldn't really need the hard copy anyway, but that will save you a lot of space. If you actually do get through this in the future, it's always good to have a system that, as soon as something comes in the house and you don't want it, just recycle it. If you have to act on it, and if you have to file it. Because the problem with this whole theory is you can get done, and then in a year from now you'll be back not where you started, but it can get bad pretty quick again. And again, it's happened to me. Other strategies we'd like to talk about is the 1 year rule. Does anybody do this? If you haven't used it in a year, it's time to say goodbye. No. It's probably true. I think that, with me, I can even justify, I didn't get invited to that fancy party last year, so might not have wore that dress, but it's not going away quite yet. Or whatever. There's all justifications, but it is true that if you haven't used, and this we're talking about functional items, not sentimental items. If you haven't used it in a year, then perhaps it's, time. And you can make that 2 years if that makes you feel better. But what ifs? I say what ifs equal clutter, and what that means is we all do that too, but what if this happens, or what if this happens? Depending on how expensive the items are, the what ifs really do equal clutter. I can see if it's a very, very expensive item, then the what ifs would be a problem because you'd have to replace it. But this almost goes back to the moving. It's very expensive to move, so, especially if it's a what if, but maybe even if it's just a low-end item, you'd be better off almost just donating it now, and when you get to your new location, just going to Walmart. Because if you end up moving a lot of heavy things that you don't use very often, the cost is going to outweigh any benefit. So, and then the stock up on duplicates when there's a good sale. We do this too sometimes. We might see something that we like and we buy it in every color, or we think it's just a good deal and there'll never be another good deal. And I think that can't be less true in this day and age when there's sales all the time. It just amazes me that, sometimes it seems the stores are giving the stuff away. So stocking up on duplicates thinking you won't be able to get it in the future probably isn't a good idea because it will just, build your clutter back up. So if it's expensive, that is very, very hard to get rid of, even if you don't like it, don't want it, don't need it. So that's what I would recommend if you could sell it. If it's valuable to someone else, then that might make the process a little bit easier of giving it away. But just because it's expensive, even if you don't use it, it's probably not a good idea to keep it. Then we have the room in the basement with the broken things we're going to fix later. That's another common one. So we should fix them, or if we don't, then we probably need to say goodbye to them. Because it means if we haven't fixed it in a couple of years, it means we probably don't need it anyway, because otherwise we would have fixed it and used it. And And then the last one's kind of a family joke. When I buy new shoes, I'm supposed to give a pair away. So one item in, one of my, and that, so that means like, you know, it's not like I bought a TV, I'm giving away a couch. It just means if, you know, if you're reading paperback books and you keep buying new ones, well, why don't you donate 5, you know, because you keep buying new ones. So finding a home, I mean, this is another issue people grapple with. And so we definitely talked about, you know, starting with what you're going to keep, what you want to give to friends and family, what you may want to sell if it has a value. You know, you go through that process, but then what do you do with it? And we already talked about the goal of minimizing trash. So trying to find a good second home that you're going to be comfortable with. That's what we're going to talk about next. So gifting it. So, you know, you can talk to your family, talk to your children, talk to friends if they've expressed interest, if they're always commenting on something in your home and you don't need it anymore, maybe it would be a great place for it to be loved again. You know, and you'll know they're in good hands. But my third bullet down, have a plan B. So has anybody tried to give their dining room set to their kids yet? So plan B. Unfortunately, as the generations go, tastes have changed so much, and it's not necessarily in a good way. I'm the bearer of the bad news. I don't agree with it. You know, I don't know why they'd rather have an IKEA bureau than the beautiful antique that was well made, but it is very, very true. So your kids and then your grandkids, if anybody has any, less and less they're going to want this. They're very much more into experiences than materialistic items. They don't want to spend a lot of money on that stuff. They want to be on the move, having fun. So it makes it very, very difficult. So if you're thinking that your kids want it, check with them, and then before you ask, be ready to accept whatever the answer is, because it might not be what you want to hear. And then if you do, though, if you have a lot of lovely items and a lot of lovely children that want them, then you have the opposite problem. So there are software programs, and you know, you can look online, or call me or whatever, but you know, I'm not going to go too much into this, but there are softwares that can help distribute an estate if you really do have items that your children, or you know, well, I want that. You know, or you can create systems like games of, you know, handing out numbers and going around the room and putting the top 3 items. There's a lot of ways to do it, so that's the exact opposite problem. So sell it. Well, we all want to make money, but I think we've already started to allude to where we're going with this one, is that it's really hard in this market right now. You know, there's a lot of people downsizing, obviously. A lot of them do give their items to donation sites. You know, if you have a beautiful bureau and you decide, I'm just going to donate it, I don't even care, and then Goodwill slaps a $25 price tag on it, then that is obviously, the prices are just being driven down. There's a lot of beautiful items in the world right now that unfortunately, you know, the demand is not as high as the supply. So it's making it very, very difficult. I've been doing this a couple of years, and I've seen it get worse over the 2 years that I've been doing this. Auctioneers won't take any, you know, they're hard pressed to take anything anymore. I have to convince them, you know, and it's just very hard. So, you know, there are certain things, obviously, sterling silver, you know, is still pretty, you know, there are items that we can go through, but it's very high. A lot of sports memorabilia, guns in the state of Maine and ammunition are big. But, you know, the things that we think, anything big and brown and antique, unfortunately, is not desirable right now. And it's so sad because they're beautiful, and it's just sad, but it's very hard. I mean, not to say you can't sell them, and I'm probably jumping ahead a slide. There are ways to sell them, but the problem is if you think a collector is going to come in and give you some decent money, that's probably going to be very difficult unless it's a very custom, beautiful antique piece that's in perfect condition. That's the other thing. They've gotten very picky because there is so much in the world that they can afford to hold out for that very, very perfect piece that doesn't have any wear, tear, weather marks, or anything else. So there are different ways to sell it. So the first things to consider are, is it an end user or is someone going to resell it? The difference there is an end user, you may get more money because they're buying it and they're maybe paying whatever the market is at that time. So they'll pay you the market value of the item, whether that's like a Craigslist sale or however you find that end user. versus a resale, which would be an auctioneer or a consignment store or anything like that. But they're not going to give you full price, obviously, because they have to make a living out of this. So, there's pros and cons to each, and some of them are just easier, even if you may make a little less money. But those are the decisions that need to be weighed. And then buy outright versus consignment. So there are a few people around Maine that will buy some things outright and then turn around and sell them. And then there's others that will take them on consignment, which means you might not get your money for a few months. So that's a big decision. Some people don't mind consignment. Other people are like, I just want to be done. I'm going through this process. I don't want to wait. I just want this stuff to be gone. Because if it doesn't sell on consignment, then you have another issue because they'll be knocking at your door with it, what do you want to do with this bureau? And at which point you could probably donate it if you wanted to. So we kind of talked about the realistic expectations in this particular market. And I also would caution when you're looking and, well, how much is this bureau? And you look on eBay or anywhere or do some research and say, oh, people have this listed for $300. That's not actually what it's worth. That's what someone's asking for it. So you need to go in and see the actual sales. I had this with a client who swore that her dishes were worth $300, and I finally showed her how check off sales that are done, and they were selling for $10. So, it's just, you can ask anything you want, so you just need to be cautious about that. And what, however you perceive the value of an item, it's really what someone's willing to pay. We all know that. And so, you can work with collectors. And we have a fairly large database of these, but you can find them. I mean, I had a client that cut out all these little ads from all those notes, the forecast or the notes. There's always ads for people buying antiques, buying books, buying, whatever. So you can cut those out and call them, and then as you start the process, you can ask them, well, if it's not you, do you know anybody else? And you'll have there's so many people in Maine. I'm still going to caution, they may not pay what you want, but there are a lot of people buying used items and trying to make a living off reselling them. So there's collectors, dealers, there's stores around that will buy items, and obviously there's a lot of clothing and furniture and household consignment stores in Maine, for sure. So it just depends what's important to you, whether you are willing to wait it out or you want your money now. So a tag sale, sometimes they're called estate sales. I mean, typically that was after a person passed and, the whole house, all the contents of the house was up for sale. Now, we do tag sales, which are similar to yard sales, but they are throughout the house, and it's a variety of items. And to make this beneficial, you need a lot of things. You need good parking. You need a good location. You can't live too remotely. So, if you live in South Portland, have a great big driveway, that's a start. But you also need a variety of items. When people come to these, they don't want just all clothes. They don't want just all furniture. There needs to be household items, clothes, furniture, books, collectibles. So all that needs to happen, and then it has to be advertised in the appropriate places to make it profitable. And because it's very, very time-consuming to set this up. Typically, you need to price every single item. And have people had yard sales before? It's only one step above that, so you know how that goes. And people want to bargain, and you can put a price tag in there. So it's a little stressful and it's a little time-consuming. So you need to weigh how much, unless you think it's fun. Some people actually enjoy it. But if you don't think so, then you maybe want to weigh, the lack of fun versus how much money you might actually get. Online sales, again, back to your packet. I think, is it the third one? Yeah. So there's many different online outlets, and Jill is now in the back, and she told me earlier she set up the, is it Bath Brunswick or just Brunswick?
The one I set up is the Brunswick, Maine area online yard sale page on Facebook.
On Facebook, right. So I did put it up in Facebook Marketplace. All have them, but since we're right here in Brunswick, and Jill actually set that one up. I don't know how many people are actually on Facebook, but it's pretty easy to get on, and you don't have to do the whole friend a million people. You can actually get on it just for the purpose of using these yard sales. I put Craigslist directions in here because I've done these before and people ask me, so I put them in here. Facebook is probably a little easier to use, and as Jill pointed out earlier, the benefit is it's probably your neighbor's friend. Like there's probably more of a relationship that people would call, get in contact with you. Craigslist, you really don't know where they're coming from, who they are. And what did you say? There's 2 spots at the police station for smaller items to do the deal.
The police station has 2 spots with a sign that says for yard sale sales, and you can pull in there and meet your a buyer, right there at the police station. Yeah.
So that may or may not work for furniture. It may. I mean, if you have a truck and some strength, strong people, you could actually do that for almost anything. We typically make sure if we're in the home that we're there. If I'm setting up a Craigslist sale, I'm not going to not be there and then have some stranger show up. So in case you want to try this, there's obviously eBay. One of the problems I think with eBay is that a buyer could be in California and then you have to figure out how to mail it. So I even stay away from that because it's a lot. And then if you misestimate the postage, then you're practically in the hole. So, but it is a way. I'm listing all the potential ways, and it depends what it is. Some items really go great on eBay, and if that's the case, we will do that. So we talked a lot about this already. I don't need to reiterate that I love the idea of donations because hopefully someone's going to use your item that really, really needs it. And again, finding something maybe that you're passionate about. I have had clients before say, I don't like Goodwill, and they feel like they're not really sure where the money's going. So I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying if that's what you have, then maybe you should think about some local organizations, schools, churches, a lot of like art supplies. If you have an abundance of art supplies, some of the schools in the area, if they're in good condition, may be interested in those, and that would maybe make you feel better about donating them. Some people pick up. Salvation Army does. I don't know if I think it's Wednesdays around here. I'm not 100% sure, but they'll have a day a week where they can come to your house and pick up, which is huge. They carry out, and that is an issue of how am I actually going to disperse with this? It's heavy and big, and they'll come pick up. They don't accept all items. This is true of not just when you're selling it. I said that they get very picky. I have found now even the donation world is very picky. There's a great organization in Portland called Furniture Friends, and they collect furniture for refugees and others in Portland that, fire victims, etc., that have basically nothing. So I've tried a number of times to donate, and they like items that are about no more than 2 years old, no pets, no smoking, no anything. So it's a tough one because they have so many donations. Again, they get to be picky because there's so much stuff in the world, and once you find out you can't sell it, everybody's donating it, and then now they get to be picky. So it's getting harder and harder to figure out. So again, I don't want anybody to be disappointed when in Furniture Friends, I brought them up because they do pick up, but sometimes they have a little bit of a wait. So also be prepared to wait 3 weeks or so for them to pick up. But those pickup ones are great. Freeport Community Services, I know I'll put in a plug even though you're all in Brunswick. They have a thrift store and they will pick up. So again, I put potential tax deduction here because I can't swear you'll get one anymore, but it's worth getting a receipt and checking it out with your accountant. And then recycling. I like recycling. And the last sheet of this packet, in case, I assume most of us are familiar with what can be recycled, but I am with clients sometimes and they don't know. So I stuck this in here. This is from Eco Maine. It's always a good resource. Their website is a good resource to show what is recyclable and what isn't. And it says right up here, paper, plastic, but it actually is not all plastic. They don't take those plastic shopping bags. So, that's why the chart's probably pretty good. And metal can be recycled. Mostly it's free of charge. Some towns, I don't know about Brunswick, do you have curbside? Yeah. Curbside recycling? Yeah. Great. So that works well on a weekly basis. Maybe if you're doing a home clean out, I don't know if they take as much as you might have, so you might need to find a drop-off location. And then I'd say Eco Maine is a good resource. We already talked about trash. We try to minimize it. There are things that will end up in the trash, but it's by weight again, so we try to minimize because there will be a bill associated with it. And then there's like the electronics and things like that. Just be on the alert for special days that, because that will make it less expensive. They'll have electronic days that you can drop off, or sometimes they have e-waste days that are fundraisers, so you might have one, the Brunswick Boy Scouts, for example, might have one where you can drop off all your e-waste for a donation. So there are ways to help others while getting rid of things that would be typically hard to get rid of. But I think we've worked at Brunswick a few times, but I have employees that typically go to the dump for us in Brunswick. But I just found I'm in Freeport, and the dump has some pretty weird hours, and they're not open Mondays and Tuesdays. So knowing things like that definitely is helpful, because if you clean out through Sunday night at 5, and then you're stuck with your things till Wednesday. That can be kind of a bummer. Many jobs, the other thing, have swap areas, and they're a little less picky. So, you might have something that you can put in the swap area that someone else will get some use out of. So there, it serves its purpose, but as I said, we try to minimize it. I think that's the last slide, actually. So now, if anybody has any questions. Hi.
How long does the monkey get tax payers?
Well, it was on that sheet, so I don't want to say it off. I would probably just refer to it, but John, do you have the sheets? I don't have my glasses on either.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, I think it is 7 years.
It doesn't say the number of years.
It was 7. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is 7 years, and yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
What about old photos?
Well,
I know people that have scanned them, friends who've scanned.
Yeah, I think that's probably in there, and I just glazed over that, I'm sorry. Yes, it's expensive, so it just depends. We've had people digitize them, and it is not a cheap process. If you're talking about before the whole digital camera, you have all these. Yeah, you can try to digitize them. It just depends how important it is to you, because it's not cheap. So it is very hard. I mean, again, you can go through and pick the best ones. John, do you have any other? You can come up if you want, John. John's good at questions. Do you have any other ideas on that? She said photos, like the box of
photos
photo
go,
albums and all.
I think the hard thing with sentimental items like photos is they mean a lot to us. And I recently had this conversation with my young children. Like, I was thinking I'd save this for you. My daughter said, why? Because I thought you might want it someday. She goes, I wouldn't want it now or really ever. And I thought, oh. So it's understanding the things that are valuable to you and finding out sooner than later, are they valuable to my family? Do they want them? How much of my life's experience do they actually want to take on? When I'm off doing something else, playing golf, or I've passed away, it's kind of a little saying I sometimes say, and I think to myself, because I too can put a lot of things in the closet that I want to keep. My life is going to come down to a few boxes of things that I cherish that very few other people cherish like I do. So just minimizing all of that stuff and deciding how much of these pictures really mean a lot to me and to my family, and then say, okay, I can part with the rest of them.
Unless you want to pay it. I mean, it's up to you. I mean,
But you want to pay someone to scan it, and that does take a lot of time, and you'll spend a lot of money for something you may never look through again.
I know,
as
like,
well.
I just can't see me ever throwing these photo albums away.
well, I've had clients that say, "Oh, just throw away all those photo albums." Oh, sorry, and I say, "No, you have to. I can't even throw away other people's photos." But it happens, and we eventually do, because I asked them a couple times, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" And they're sure. I have to abide by that. But yeah.
I went through a package of photos the other day with one of our clients, and she was going through one, and she said, none of these are developed correctly. She goes, check that one. And I'm flipping through them, and one picture out of 36 had actually a picture on it. She's like, I'm saving all this stuff, and they're not even real pictures. So you're just plucking out one picture.
That makes it very easy when there's not a picture on the picture.
And you don't need all the negatives. You're not going to make more of them. So save the picture, get rid of the negatives and the packaging, and it'll make it easier.
Well, we're definitely not saying it's easy. It's just we're being pragmatic here that maybe when's the last time you looked at the pictures, and he's right, you spend all the money to digitize them and you may not look at them. So, sorry, go ahead.
How do you get rid of photographs, negatives, and slides?
Well,
Are they recyclable?
photographs can be recycled. Slides? Do you think slides can be recycled?
They can be recycled.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
We use EcoMain for a lot of things because EcoMain is, consider a giant incinerator. Everything goes into the incinerator at about 2,000 degrees and turns into ash instantly. So it's important because even pictures, are a sensitive material. So we try to use a facility where those things just disappear forever once. You know, they're not gonna end up in somebody else's hand, so.
Yeah, but you can, I mean, it's up to you if you want to do truly recycling, which, where does it end up? Probably at Eco Maine, that's, I know, we all try to be so good, but.
You can put them in your coffin.
That is a funny joke, because I said that once. I used to scrapbook, and we used to sit around all us girls and say, what are we going to do with these? Our kids aren't going to want them. We're going to put them in our coffin, because no one else wants them. So it's very funny that you said that. Well, I appreciate you letting me speak, and I enjoyed it. And hopefully you got some little nugget out of it. But thank you very, very much.